What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Art Shack. So today I got a sketch that I did during a live YouTube hangout on my YouTube channel. So I thought it'd be pretty cool to actually be able to both simultaneously record live for you guys during that hangout, and then also use my recording camera and record, for a future video where I can actually explain everything that I did, during that video that I made during the hangout. So in this video, I initially had no idea what I was going to sketch. And I kind of have this method sometimes where if I don't know what I want to do, I just start putting down some line work on the page, start making some shapes, things like that. And then from that, I kind of play like connected dots of sorts. And I start making some land masses and cliffs, things like that. And I start to really morph this landscape into like a very, very hazardous and like a big cliffs everywhere. If you sort of like that landscape, if you take the wrong turn, you ain't coming back alive. So that sort of thing. It's just kind of like a very hostile place. It's always fun to draw places that you don't really know of too well. The unfamiliar places. It just kind of pushes the limits of what you can kind of come up with your imagination. So it makes it for a really fun experience to draw. Alright, so for the first portion of this video, I mostly did a lot of line work. And I know a very common question I was getting during the live hangout is, what's up with that paintbrush that you keep seeing? I use that paintbrush simply just to clean away eraser shavings as I'm erasing, reshaping the lines as I'm going along. So I just use that to easily clean away any of the erasers. That way, when you use your hand, sometimes you can smear the drawing. It just helps to prevent that from happening. So it's just another way to do something. So in this sketch that you can see, I'm quickly putting in some mountain work into the background, but I really don't focus on that much. I'm really more focused on the cliffs that are more towards the foreground. And as you can see, I'm just doing some quick little details here and there, just to kind of as placeholders for myself, just to so I can kind of see where how things are being shaped, the direction of them, things like that. It's mainly just for myself to be able to see and understand what's going on. Notice some of the line work in here. Notice how the direction of the line conveys the actual direction of like the movement of the object in real life. If I have a cliff, those lines are going vertical. If I have a flat plane, those lines are going mostly horizontal. Those directional lines can really help in a beginning drawing to be able to portray, what direction objects are supposed to be, or how they're supposed to look in space. Because if you have vertical lines for like a horizontal object, it sometimes doesn't always look correct. It could throw you off a little bit. So for the beginning stages of a drawing, I always like to simplify things as much as I can. Just use directional line just to convey the movement or shape of a general object. If the object is vertical, draw vertical lines. If the object is mostly horizontal, draw horizontal lines to convey it. And then if there's any shape or movement, if you're drawing like the ocean or a wave, draw the lines, following the movement of the water. That way what's happening. It just makes it easier for when you go back in and start shading and adding in details, you kind of know what's happening in the image. And so here I've kind of got the general shape and outline of the composition that I wanted, and I'm lightly going in now, starting to add in some highlights and shadows, mostly shadows at this point because I don't have any highlights to make because the paper is white. But as I start making in more shadow, I'll eventually start making some highlights from those. And now, that I'm doing the shading, the initial composition is pretty much completed. It's going to change a little bit in the future, maybe a couple minutes or so. I'm going to add in some more cliffs and things like that. But for the most part, the only thing that's left to do in this drawing is really just shading and adding textures and things like that. And the way that I do that normally is just by taking the pencil, normally a 2B, or if I really want to get crazy, I'll use a 4B. And using the natural tooth of the page, I'll kind of use this pencil on the side almost. Also, notice how I'm holding the pencil sometimes. Sometimes I hold it really far back. it just kind of, it lets the pencil do most of the work for you at that point. It's much more expressive, you know, the line work. It becomes much more fluid. When you get really uptight on the pencil, it gets very, very stiff, I find. So try and lay back on your pencil somewhat, and it'll kind of change your drawings. It's pretty cool. But like I was saying, with the shading, I'll usually lay my pencil down lightly and just let the graphite catch on the page, and all the little dimples on the page will remain white because I'm not pressing too hard, and that will create like a natural texture. And then from that, I'll usually use like a thin eraser, usually that Tough Stuff mechanical eraser. I'm not sure what it's called at the moment, but I'll use that, and I'll erase out very fine lines out of the cliffs, and then I'll kind of create like a uneven textured, you know, jagged surface sort of deal. You know, because you just gotta remember, you know, surface textures, these are kind of like a desert cliff sort of thing. And they're going to be very, very rough to the touch and feel. So almost like, you know, how sandpaper is on your hands, it's kind of like trying to mimic that surface, and it just takes some thought to remember, you know, how it looks in real life. I think it was somewhere in this point of the drawing, you know, when I was in the live hangout, everyone started suggesting different characters that I should be drawing that are essentially just jumping off the cliff. I thought it was pretty funny. I didn't end up doing anything like that, you know, just because that wasn't really the focus of what I was doing. I just wanted to make it, you know, like a hazardous landscape, you know, just to kind of see how far I could push things. And notice how late I'm putting in the sky. I wasn't too sure if I really wanted to have a sky or not, and you know, just putting it in so late, it kind of contradicts everything that I've done in the past as far as drawings. But luckily, you know, I didn't have a lot of foreground, you know, detailed textures. You know, like let's say if I had a tree, I'd have a whole bunch of different particles and shapes going on within the top of the tree, and shading around that to create the sky would make a very uneven texture. So at least in this case, I only had a couple triangles for the mountains and a couple rough shapes for the cliffs that hit the sky. So putting in a sky this late wasn't so bad. So that worked out pretty well in my favor, which is good. But normally for doing the sky, it's I'll usually take a 4B pencil. That's usually the pencil that I'll use for it, and I'll normally shade where I want the sky to be, and I'll kind of do a quick outline of where I want clouds to be, and I'll just shade around where all the clouds are. It just helps with the erasing, that way you don't have to erase so much. And then sometimes if you blend too hard with the blending stump, you can really set in that graphite, and it's very hard to erase at that point. But normally I'll take that blending stump, and, you know, that's dirty, and I'll lightly blend up in the clouds just to kind of create some volume, and then I'll take the eraser and erase them out. But if you really want to kind of see how I do it, I have a video on, you know, how to draw or erase rather realistic, you know, textured clouds, and it'll really go in. It's a full-time drawing tutorial you could check out, and that one will help you quite a bit. But it was pretty funny because at this point of drawing, you know, I was doing a lot of the cliffs and things like that, and I was kind of getting lost because I wasn't too sure what I wanted to do, you know, between those two cliffs towards the background, and in the foreground, you know, it's still very, very white, very blank. And, you know, I was saying during the live stream, you know, I'm not too sure what I should really be doing at this point, because I've kind of put myself in a bind almost, because I don't know how to really overcome this and what I can really put in to fix it. But luckily, you know, if you're drawing in front of a live audience, you know, they're more than willing to give you some input on what you can kind of add into the drawing. So at that point, I was kind of asking, you know, help, what do I add in here? And they were kind of giving me suggestions and things like that, and I was thinking about how I could possibly add them in, and it worked out really good. That's going to end up happening pretty soon here. But it just goes to show, you know, if you're kind of stuck on a drawing, you can easily get a like a second opinion on what's going on. And you can see I just changed the foreground of the landscape, and I'm adding in the background. I'm adding in a waterfall and like a river in between these cliffs. That was by popular demand of the audience. So it was really cool how that worked out. But like I was saying, it's always good to get a second opinion of your work, because something that you think will look good, in a certain situation or spot, you can always bring it to someone else and see what they think, or don't even say anything to them, just see what their initial reaction is, just to get a nice organic reaction out of the person, and then you can see what they say, and then you can always take it into consideration, say, no, I don't really want to do that, or yeah, let's see how that looks. And in this case, I kind of took that leap of faith, trusted my audience, and I ended up putting that river in with that, small waterfall in the background, and I really liked how it came out. It really kind of completed the image overall. So just getting that opinion can really help out. It can give you that idea that you never would have had, and it can make what you're doing a lot better. And so now in this stage of the drawing, I officially have the completed composition. I have officially changed the foreground, the way the cliffs are shaped, and I also added a couple cliffs on the right side of the image. But it's mainly just some shading from here on. And notice how in the cliffs, there's different sections of cliff, and for each part of those cliffs that are kind of further out, I'll shade them darker just to kind of create some contrast between that and like the next section of cliffs. It just helps to kind of push them out and make them separate, and it gives the image a bit more three-dimensionality to it, just something to give it a little bit more visual interest, and it makes it look like you could almost walk into the landscape and walk around to an extent. But the main portion left of this video is I just add a little bit more surface texture, a bit more detail into the water, and kind of blend it around a little bit. But I also do add a lot of detail into the back mountains a bit, just to kind of make them punch through a little bit. But here I go with the blending stump, and I just kind of blended out the water a little bit. I didn't want to put too much detail in the water because it's kind of an important part of it, but at the same time I really want the cliffs to really show through in this one. And by varying the amount of details you put in certain objects will kind of render how important that object is compared to everything else. If I highly detailed the water versus the cliffs, the water would stand out more to the viewer, and that would be portrayed as a more important aspect of the drawing than what everything else was. But in this case, I start off with the cliffs. That's what I initially wanted, and that's what I wanted to really show through in this. So that's what I really spent the most time detailing in this. So, and because of that, I knew that the water, if I detailed it just as much, they would both be competing for the star of the show, so to speak. So you just gotta be mindful of what element in the image you want to be the most detailed. You can detail everything in an image, and everything will kind of be in almost imbalance, or in balance with everything else. But leaving one specific object, more detailed over everything else will kind of give it the center stage show. So that's always something you can always kind of remember as you're drawing. You can always just kind of engage what do you want to be the most important thing in the drawing. Alright, so I'm just adding in some of the final details into the mountains in the background, and then just a few more details here and there, and this drawing is pretty much completed. And then I eventually go on to do another drawing during the live hangout, which I'll probably end up rendering in a separate video from this one. So I'm just going to leave this video with this drawing. And I know a lot of you have been asking, how to draw cliffs, how to draw rocks. So hopefully this kind of gives you a good idea on both the subjects within this drawing. So I hope you all enjoyed this one. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. It really helps me out. Also subscribe. I'm doing videos like this quite often, once a week at least. I'm doing live hangouts every now and then. So it's I try to put a lot of good content out. But I really do appreciate you, for watching this, and I hope you see you around sometime soon. All right, everyone. I'll see you all later.